There is a bin, a simple, unremarkable bin, sitting at the foot of the stairs leading up to Air Force One on the tarmac of Beijing Capital International Airport. And into that bin, before boarding, members of the Trump White House staff, aides, and the journalists traveling with them dropped everything: burner phones, lapel pins, credential badges, souvenirs handed to them moments earlier by Chinese government officials. All of it gone into the bin. Now, notice that, because that detail, the bin, the tarmac, the deliberate unburdening, is not a footnote. It is a tell. And once you understand what it tells you, everything else about this particular moment in American diplomacy starts to look different. Here is the one thing that doesn't add up. You don't build a bin protocol for something you didn't expect to need. Security procedures of that specificity staged at the base of the president's aircraft after an official state visit, specifically for items received from a foreign government. Those are not improvised. Someone anticipated that Chinese officials would be offering gifts. Someone anticipated that those gifts could not come aboard, and someone planned accordingly. GLI. Which means that before Air Force One ever touched down in Beijing, there was already an understanding somewhere inside that White House that whatever the Chinese gave them, they could not keep. Think about what that implies. Think about what you have to believe about those gifts in order to plan for their disposal before they are even received. To understand why this matters, you have to understand the context in which this visit occurred. This was not an informal meeting on the sidelines of a multilateral summit. This was a deliberate, high-profile engagement with the government of the People's Republic of China, a government that American intelligence agencies have for years described as one of the most aggressive state-sponsored espionage actors operating against the United States. The FBI, the NSA, the CIA, they do not agree on much. They agree on this. China's intelligence services are sophisticated, patient, and relentless. And they have historically shown a particular appetite for access, physical access, digital access, proximity access to American officials at the highest levels of government. The burner phone as a concept is not new to this conversation. American officials traveling to China have been advised for years by the State Department, by intelligence briefers, by anyone who has spent time thinking about counterintelligence risk to bring devices they are willing to leave behind. The idea is simple. Assume the device has been compromised. Do not bring it home. Do not plug it into your network. Do not give it access to anything you care about. This is standard. This is known. This is, in fact, the kind of advice that gets handed out in classified briefings and eventually in public guidance documents. The burner phone protocol is not a secret. What is worth pausing on is the scope of what ended up in that bin, because it was not just phones. Here is what multiple outlets are reporting. Items disposed of before boarding included burner phones, yes, but also credential badges, the physical identification passes issued for the visit, lapel pins, and souvenirs. Now, souvenirs might sound innocuous, a decorative item, a keepsake. Except that in the counterintelligence world, the souvenir is not the concern. The concern is what the souvenir might contain. Miniaturized listening devices have been found in objects far more innocent looking than a diplomatic gift. Credential badges, the laminated passes that hung around the necks of White House staff as they moved through Chinese government facilities, those are objects that, if engineered correctly, could have spent an entire state visit in proximity to some of the most sensitive conversations happening between American and Chinese officials. Lapel pins sit on a jacket for hours. They travel through secured rooms. They are close to the mouth of whoever is wearing them. This is not a paranoid reading. This is, in fact, exactly how a foreign intelligence service thinks about access. So walk through it with me. Before the delegation boards in Beijing, there is a bin. Into the bin go the phones, the badges, the pins, the small gifts. The bin stays on the tarmac. Air Force One lifts off. And now here's what we know. Those items were not swept for devices on site, at least not in any way that has been reported. They were not transferred to the embassy for analysis. They were, as far as reporting indicates, simply discarded, left behind in Beijing. Consider what that means for what might be learned from them and by whom. The revelation is not that the White House was cautious. Caution, in this context, is correct. The revelation is the combination. The pre-planning of the disposal, the breadth of items included, the manner of disposal, and the location. They left the items in Beijing, on a Chinese-administered tarmac, at an airport operated under the authority of the Chinese government. The contents of that bin, the phones, the badges, the pins did not leave China, which means if anyone wanted to examine what was in that bin, or retrieve what was in that bin, or learn anything from what was in that bin, China was the jurisdiction in which all of that would happen. You can call that an oversight. You can call it a logistical decision. What you cannot call it is invisible. And here is the part that should concern all of us. This visit occurred at a moment of significant diplomatic recalibration between Washington and Beijing. Tariff negotiations, technology restrictions, Taiwan policy, the stakes of that engagement were not symbolic. They were structural. The conversations that happened during that visit in those rooms between those officials will shape American policy for years. And the people who had those conversations were, by the account of their own security protocols, moving through an environment in which they themselves believed foreign surveillance was a live risk. They knew. They planned for it. They built the bin. The question that remains is this: what was in those credential badges before they were handed out? Credential systems for state visits are coordinated in advance through diplomatic channels with the host government. The United States side does not produce those passes unilaterally, which means there is a chain of custody question who touched those badges before they went around the necks of White House staff, and what, if anything, was ever done to examine them before they were worn. And the second question, quieter but perhaps more important: if the White House knew enough to build this protocol, what did the intelligence community brief them about before wheels down in Beijing? Because those briefings, whatever they contained, were serious enough to produce a bin. The bin is on the tarmac. The plane is in the air. What was left behind, we may never fully know